Welcome to This Week in Poker. Coming up, how will the Reed bill impact online poker in the US? We discuss with Dave F-Train Behr and Dan Michalski. And later on, we attempt to break the Guinness Book of World Record for how long we can make this noise. Stay tuned. Hey look, we're back. I'm Chops, flying solo today as the other entities are flying to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. being the central hub for everything going on in the poker world right now, as Harry Reid dropped another draft of that bill today. Have you had a chance to look at it? This is Dave F-Train Behr, everybody. Hey, Dave.
Hi. I had about half an hour this morning and about 20 minutes ago to look at it.
Hopefully some of the people in the chat log have read thoroughly and can chime in with some of the latest revisions in this draft compared to the last. Joining us on Skype later, Dan Michalski from Pokerati. We'll all have a discussion on everything Reed bill, how it's going to impact the industry, how it might fuck over some people in the industry and make some people in the industry a lot of money. And then, of course, Jess Wellman, Poker Headlines, will be coming up very, very shortly. Jess will reveal her biggest headlines of the year and some of her favorite too. So let's not waste too much time. Before we get to Jess though, Dave and I were talking before the show started on what we think is probably the single biggest factor in this online poker bill. The one thing that for sure will push it through, get it into law. And that one thing is, do Hummel. I just got to know shit from the team.
Welcome to French Canada. We have everything a heart could desire. Trapezes, trampolines, and lots of cheese. Would you like a mustache?
Hey there. Let's get Jess Wellman on for Poker Headlines. Jess Wellman, are you there?
I am.
How's it going?
It's cold. I'm in Kentucky and it's -5 degrees here.
What are you doing in Kentucky?
I flew home for the holidays, so hanging out with the fam for a little while before I hit Vegas at the end of the year and then off to PCA.
You had a pretty big week. I think when we shot the show last week, we still had not, played down to the final table and had Antonio. I'm assuming outside of the Reed bill, that might be your biggest headline this week?
Over Melanie Iglesias?
Well, you got to talk about that too. That's pretty huge.
I mean, that's more important than anything to me. In all honesty, though, I will say I probably would put Melanie over Antonio just because it has a larger impact on poker to people who maybe don't follow poker.
Right.
For those who don't know, Royal Flush girl Melanie Iglesias won the Maxim Hometown Hottie contest this year. So as a result, she gets all sorts of stuff. She's doing promotions with Maxim, serving as kind of the same thing she does as a Royal Flush girl, being a spokesperson and a sponsor at events and stuff. She told me at Bellagio she gets to go to the Super Bowl. She's going to be getting a pictorial in the magazine, and she will be included in the Maxim's 100. Pardon me for not knowing this. I'll defer to you guys. What's the name of this list?
It's like the 100 hottest girls of the year. It's like the 100 hottest girls of the year.
Yeah, so I feel like they do one of those lists every month, but the most important be-all, end-all list of the year. She's automatically a part of that, so she's super excited, and it's really good exposure for her and really good exposure for the WPT and poker in turn. Let's just hope she sticks around.
We're all about the pop culture at Wicked Shops, and that's huge. It's huge for her, obviously, personally, but it's also good for World Poker Tour and poker in general that she can bring that kind of exposure to everything that we do.
I would think that this would shake up Wicked Chops' editorial calendar for the next 6 months. This has to be earth-shattering news for you guys.
Oh, this is, it's a boon. It was like when Shannon Elizabeth was on Dancing with the Stars, or Joanna Krupa was on Dancing with the Stars, when we have something Annie Duke on Celebrity Apprentice, all of that. These are usually some of our bigger traffic driving moments. Kicks the shit out of the Reed bill traffic-wise, I will tell you that.
doesn't surprise me.
Yes.
So yeah, that's to me the bigger WPT news. But yes, Antonio won his second WPT at a really good final table. I would say it's certainly the best one we've seen this year, even though Bellagio Cup, you had Phil Ivey, Justin Smith making a repeat appearance, and a lot of really good hands for the poker fans out there who think the WPT doesn't really put the most interesting hands out. I've heard from within production that the hands are really, really good. So hopefully that'll end up being a good episode. John Reisner was at that final table, finished fourth, and then flew home to Florida and got arrested.
What did he get arrested for, Jess?
DUI. I've not heard if he's been. I know he's been charged with it. He's has 2 DUIs on his record previously, as well as a battery charge. They are all in the span of 10 years, which means in Florida, the Florida law on repeat offenders like that, there should be some jail time in his future, should he be convicted. But
do you think this will do anything to... If, let's assume it's status quo and the rebuild doesn't happen and everything kind of remains the same for the next couple of years, do you think this does anything to his Full Tilt Poker sponsorship? Or, let's face it, a lot of people have done a lot worse in the poker world, but what do you think?
I think there are a lot of people in poker who have DUIs. I think the fact that it's coming out that he has a lot, and if he has jail time, I wouldn't be surprised if Full Tilt maybe took him out of the forefront of people that they're promoting and maybe eventually elected not to renew his contract. But poker players with DUIs are not that uncommon of a thing. It's the repeat offenses, right. You just won $5 million, you really can't take a cab comments. But hopefully that $5 million will buy him a darned good attorney, and hopefully for him he avoids jail time, though I think the sentiments on 2+2 and elsewhere in the poker world are that if you're going to keep doing this, maybe you will learn your lesson with something like that.
Right. Did you catch his mugshot?
You know, it's not a bad mug. I was looking at the collection of them. Yeah. All of them are reasonably okay. I mean, I would be like, if that was my driver's license photo and I was John Reisner, I would be okay with it. Right. So it is mugshot. I feel like you can't do much better.
Jess, give us just a quick, if you got arrested for your third DUI, what would your mugshot look like? Let's see.
I would probably be sobbing. I would have the ugly cry with the red face, and how am I ever going to deal with this? All but right. That's not going to happen.
One quick question that came in, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but back to Melanie Iglesias, because let's face it, that's the most important news of the week. Do you know where she might rank in that Maxim list? It's not going to be like 100, is it?
Melanie just told me, told BJ Nemeth and I that she was going to be part of the list. That's part of the deal. I think it's a question of who else they end up getting and how much exposure she has, where she ends up. Usually it seems like those girls, although with these Maxim lists, always they're like, oh, this person's the number 1 hottie, and I've never heard of them before, so who knows? Maybe she'll get like 3rd.
Okay. What else is going on in the poker world?
Tournament-wise, you had a few. We have Prague getting going. We have the WSOP circuit in Atlantic City main event wrapping up. The 10K is inexplicably 5 days down the line. And APPT Sydney, while Bellagio was going on, actually produced a pretty good final table too, with Roland DeWolf, Daniel Negreanu, and the winner of that one was Jonathan Karamalaitis, who plays online as X Monster Dong X.
Good for Monster Dong.
I know. What's not to love about a screen name like that?
Yeah, actually, that's fantastic. That's a great. What's great about that screen name is now it's just out there. He might not have a Monster Dong, but everybody thinks he does, so it's got to help in the girl department.
Exactly. Speaking of ladies' men, Gus Hansen won Full Tilt Poker Million. That's that made-for-TV one that airs in Europe. One of the bigger made-for-TV Europe events. Winner-take-all event. He defeated, I believe, James Board, who won WSOP E-main event to pick up the $1 million prize. Now we'll see how long it takes before maybe he loses it at the high-stakes online Full Tilt table.
Didn't he already lose it? Probably.
I was going to say, that makes up a small dent in his very large deficit. He's having a better year this year, though. His results are better, so maybe this is...
Gus probably lost it logging on to his Full Tilt account. I know it's been a rough high stakes online run for guests. Earlier, Jess, we were discussing what your three biggest headlines of the year would be, and your three favorite.
All right, three.
What are your three biggest 3-1?
Three is the Behr runner-up finish when he almost broke the banks of the high-stakes poker community by picking up a bracelet. That one I've never seen the players sweat in an event of the scope of $1,500 event so hard. Second, I would say is return of Michael Michalski. You have the tax problems and then the redemption with the 50K horse and then him and his brothers all making runs in the main event. Just a really good story all around. And number one, I would say the fact that poker legislation has been a topic of discussion for going on 4 months now, and maybe not as realistic as a few weeks ago, but it seems like we might actually have regulated poker in our future, and it's not just wishful thinking.
Yeah, what do you, year's over, Dave? A lot of stuff has happened this year. What do you think about Jess's biggest stories?
The Behr story definitely has to be in there for sure. The atmosphere at the Rio that night was electric, to say the least. I think the Mizrachi, it's a maybe not quite. I would have put it 2. Maybe I would have reversed those 2 and put Mizrachi at 3 and Behr at 2. But as far as the legislation goes, if it goes through, it has to be the biggest story of the year for sure.
Yeah, I would say that even if the legislation doesn't go through, it's still the biggest story of the year. I mean, people have not there hasn't been this much interest, and definitely this much mainstream interest since 2006, I think, in anything poker related. So definitely agree with you on that. I think the return of the grinder, his WSOP, probably would be my third. And then my second, I'm going to go with, and Jess, you might like this, I'm going to say the year of the woman. Despite the poor WSOP showing of all the females, in general, it's been a pretty stellar year for women. And for where poker needs to expand, or where the opportunity to expand is, it's definitely to that half of the world market. So I'm going to go with year of the woman. It was you had Annie Dukes win, you had the 2 Vanessa Selps wins, you had Russo almost taking her WPT title, Liv's win. It's a pretty good year. You had Jess final tabling and 12 weight chopping. That women's event, and you've made a couple of final tables, haven't you?
I have, and one of them even had boys at it. Can you believe it?
I know. So yeah, like we joked a couple of weeks ago, now Jess is the 8th all-time female money earner in tournament poker history.
You also, Christy Arnett.
I was going to say Christy
Arnett.
Won $30,000 in a mini F-top.
Yeah.
So I can't even be the best girl in poker media at poker anymore.
Oh. So
Very happy.
Okay, 3 biggest stories. How about your 3 favorite stories? Your 3 most fun, your 3 favorite.
Going 3-1 again.
Yep.
Third would be Phil Ivy's 8th bracelet, because I was lucky to be there. I had been sweating the final table from the beginning, and as much as I don't think the environment compared to Tom Dwan, me getting to be there and watch it, knowing that this is the guy that we're going to talk about the way people talk about Stu Unger 20 years down the line, and being able to say I was there for it was really cool.
Right.
2, this one's sentimental, but Gavin Smith and Chris Bell winning back-to-back bracelets, because the 2 of them have just been in this poker business for so long, and they both admitted this summer that they were going through rough stretches and they were pretty much broke, and they were able to turn things around and not just win bracelets, but win bracelets within 24 hours of each other. And, when Gavin was playing, Chris was there on every break, sweating him. And then when Chris was playing, Gavin and all that crew were there. And as fans of those guys, it was just really cool to see.
Okay, yeah, I forgot about that one. That actually, for my favorite, that actually should make the list. For me, it was when Madsen won the Borgata tournament at the beginning of the year, because that led to one of my favorite posts that we've ever written on Wicked Chops. It was just fantastic about how he didn't really win it and a big conspiracy around it, because there was no proof of the act. There was no video. There was just some grainy photo. There was no real proof. I'm still not sure if he actually won that. Dwight Pilgrim. Jess, I can't believe you didn't bring up Dwight Pilgrim.
He almost made it, but I had to make room for my number one, which
is?
the meeting of my two worlds and very things that drive my existence, poker and Bravo, Beth Shack on Millionaire Matchmaker.
Yeah, what did you think of that? I mean, how did she come across in that one?
The episode was a little disappointing because honestly, sorry, Beth, it seemed like she wasn't there to meet a guy. It seemed like she was very obviously there to just kind of promote herself, promote the Borgata. Like, he wanted to plan the date and she refused and made him go to Atlantic City with her. And I don't know, she was not very cooperative. I don't think Beth is going to be making a repeat appearance.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I'd say my favorite story was actually Durr's second place finish, just because of the electricity and the ramifications that could have had to the poker economy and the decimation of it. So that's it. Jess, I think that's it for the year.
It is. Oh, but one last little news.
What?
Sorry to throw this one in there. Bellagio got robbed.
Yeah,
it was very
I was hearing about that today. What happened? The actual Bellagio casino, I think it was Eric Mizrahi was tweeting about it, and that's all I've seen about it so far. But so yeah, what happened?
We're not talking Scott Montgomery in a bathroom, kids.
Right.
Like, it was robbed Ocean's 11 style. A guy came into North Ballet via motorcycle at about 3:50, 3:45 in the morning. Came in with the motorcycle helmet on, all black, couldn't really tell much about him. Pulled a gun on a guy at a craps table and collected what the police are guessing is $1.5 million worth of chips. Comes about 5 days after a similar robbery occurred at one of the station casinos, the Suncoast.
Suncoast.
Similar thing, although at the Suncoast, not 1.5 million, more like 20 grand. Not really a cash robbery because they're only going to be able to get the money if they can redeem the chips, and some of them were really high denomination chips, like $25,000 chips. So the casino says they have measures in place to be keeping eyes on anybody trying to cash in larger chips and maybe catch the guy, but haven't heard. I didn't think something like this was that possible, but I guess running in with a helmet on and a gun was sufficient enough means to pull off the task at hand.
Yeah. The rumor is, I guess it's 1.5 million in chips. That's what they're saying. But yeah, that's crazy. Hopefully, we'll see a Jean Robert JRB broke living update that he's up 2 million. And
So suddenly that bankroll got bigger.
All right, Jess. Thank you.
Been a pleasure. I'll see you guys next year, I suppose.
Yeah, till next year.
All right. Have fun, guys.
Bye, Jess.
Good. Thanks, Jess.
Bye, Dave. Bye.
All right. So before we get Dan Michalski from Pokerati on via Skype, the bill. The bill has been did you see it coming?
I can't say that I saw it coming, but I saw Reid shifting his position on this before the election. So I will go on record as admitting I voted for him, and the only reason that I voted for him was because I thought something like this might be possible.
Yeah, I actually, same situation. That was not never been a big Harry Reid fan, but thought that there's never been somebody so personally tied to, financial future as he is, and it looked like he was swaying on online poker. Didn't expect it to happen like this, but yeah, I guess I'm relatively happy about that vote now. We'll see what pans out over the next 2 years. Who knows?
Unfortunately, we're stuck with him for another 6 years.
Right
after this.
Right, I know, and that's an issue. Before we get Dan on via Skype, I think they're reaching him right now. One really interesting comment from X27R2. He said, "Du Hamel."
Welcome to French Canada. We have everything a heart could desire. Trapezes, trampolines, and lots of cheese. Would you like a mustache?
Oh, it just doesn't get old. It's never going to get old. Sorry, everybody, because you're going to see that clip for like the next 2 years and about 100 times. Dan, are you there via Skype?
I'm here right now.
Hey, how are you doing?
It's good to be on the air here.
Yeah, thanks for Skyping in and let's talk some legislation. Before we go any further, Dave, why don't you give some of your background to our viewers who might be unfamiliar, and how you've kind of, between you and Dan, within the poker media at least, you guys have really established yourselves as the authoritative sources on it. So, or I would think, and that's why you guys are on the show. So
sure.
anyway, some of your background.
I was a corporate attorney in New York City for 8 years before moving to Las Vegas 2.5 years ago to join the poker media.
Okay.
And so I've been working for various poker media outlets for the last 2.5 years, and just really, took a real interest in this legislation in particular, and just started picking it apart using, the background that I had from being a lawyer and looking at way too many statutes and those sorts of things in my previous life.
Okay. And Dan, I think most of our viewers are familiar with you, but you've been really all over this story. And it's something that you were kind of sniffing out even about 6-7 months ago. I think back in like March, May, you had posted some information about this possibly coming down. Give us some of your background on the legislative side and how you've been getting in touch with sources on this for the better part of a year now.
Yeah, well, obviously, Pokerati has taken a lot of pride in covering the political and legal elements that are relevant to the poker world, and so this sort of bill is going to be in our wheelhouse, needless to say. And I think we're benefiting from the fact that we've got a reporter on the ground in Washington D.C., Scarlett Robinson, and she's been working her sources there in D.C. But then when we started covering this stuff, like we had heard word of a Reed poker only bill taking shape back in the spring, and Reed's office was out there then putting out the message that no, this doesn't exist. Everyone, they're just exploring certain things. But we knew something was cooking, and it wasn't the only thing that was cooking. There were a lot of different things cooking, a lot of irons in the fire on behalf of poker. But this was one, and then so when it emerged in the last couple of weeks, it certainly wasn't a surprise to those of us who knew that there were reasons for it to happen, and that's kind of what everybody's exploring right now is what this bill is, what it's going to mean for poker, and but you can see, and they're speculating on whether or not it's going to pass, right? I mean, you and I have gone back and forth on where do you see it today, and one day we're at 8% passing, the next day we're at 50%, the next day, oh man, it's going to happen today, it's 80%, but it's been all over the board, and so that's what people are watching now, and I think we're all getting our education into sort of how this federal political process works when we're up against a clock like this. So that is, poker's going to get their own education on politics here. So that's been pretty interesting to watch that as well.
Okay, so for our viewers, for the next 20 or so minutes, we're going to be talking everything regarding the Reed bill. If you have any questions or comments about it, enter them in on the chat log. We'll try and get to as many as we can between Dave and Dan and myself answering. Dan, you brought up percent chances and how much it's fluctuated over the past week. I think about a week ago at this time, we were or at least I know I was in the way over 50% camp. Now I'm probably closer to like 5%. As of today, where do you put it? Where do you think the chances of this getting passed in the lame duck session are?
I am still sticking to my line of firmly somewhere between an 8% and an 88% chance of it going
Way to
through.
Commit.
I think it's very clear that the Reed camp would like to have this go through. They definitely want it. I think if they didn't want it, they would have scrapped it a while ago. You can recall that there was Senator Wyden from Oregon, I believe, earlier in the year had a bill drafted to attach to the healthcare legislation, and Harry Reid pulled the plug on that right away. Basically said, no, we're not going to mess with my healthcare stuff right now. Get this thing out of here. But so we saw how he acts in that type of situation, and here, he seems to be a lot of denials, a lot of non-confirmation confirmations, and trying to keep all the different parties happy here. But clearly, they wanted it in play, and it's been interesting though because I think the poker world, to some extent, has been, has not necessarily gone along with the plan, sort of, because no one let us know, sort of, here's the plan, that Harry Reid's going to slip it in on this, and be quiet, don't talk about it during this time, because then all the opponents get all riled up, and then, his office is getting pounded with calls and texts and emails and stuff like that, and it just creates little problems here. So I think that's something they've clearly had to adjust the strategy on the fly. They didn't necessarily want people to know about it, I think, and but now it's out there. People do know about it. They're looking at it in relation to all the tax bill, the omnibus spending bill, a variety of other means and ways that they could get this through. So it's still got a hope because it's still alive, but I think I don't see what good we're going to be doing by speculating on it, because we're all hearing from our own sources, some better than others, that are, some of them are telling us one day, oh, it's definitely going to happen. And then the next day we're hearing, no, it's dead as can be. And now I've gotten to the point that if I'm getting information at this point, I've got to wonder, is it misinformation that's being put out there? So, it's just, I'm kind of trying to revert back to being a journalist and just kind of watching how it develops.
Do you think, Dave, that a lot of people seem to believe that there was a strategy to try and keep this quiet and slip it through? There's no way that's ever going to happen in this media age anymore. Do you think that was a terribly misguided strategy?
I think it was a horrible strategy, because what happened was, when it finally did come out, most of what you were seeing were people railing against it. And they had an opportunity to really get out in front and explain why this is not only a necessary piece of legislation, but overall a good piece of legislation to kind of regulate an industry that right now kind of operates in the shadows. And instead, they just completely fumbled the ball on that point, and let the social conservatives come along and say, family, children, picking on the weak, blah 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 blah, kind of a thing. So.
Dan's willing to put his neck out on the line and go 8 to 88%. What are you?
I'll narrow a little bit more than that. I think at this point, the chances are better that it passes than that it doesn't pass. And the reason why I feel that way is because...
And during this lame duck session, you think that
yes,
we're still favorites?
And the reason why I think that is because this thing, through the three various drafts that we've seen, is still being very heavily negotiated. And I don't think it's being negotiated just with parties like the PPA. I think it's also being negotiated with various senators whose support is going to be necessary in order to, get this thing to where everybody is comfortable enough with it that they're not going to throw up any more roadblocks against it.
Do you think the PPA really has that much sway in what's going on? Dan, I know that you keep in contact with them fairly regularly. Are they really pulling any strings here, or is it just kind of sort of representing and not really doing anything?
I would say without a doubt that they're pulling some strings, but we are learning the limits or the impact of their influence here, because there are so many other operations that have a little more sway. Everything from the AGA, which is representing Caesars, MGM, and big Nevada casinos, to different Indian tribe representatives, to different state representatives. And, so they're one of a handful of voices in there. And I think this is an interesting story in the sort of, when they look back at this period historically, to be able to see like where the PPA clearly got this thing started, but this may turn into a bill that got a little bit, out of their hands at some point, when other fingers started getting into it. But that was potentially going to happen anyways, because of that's how big federal politics works there, and you can look at PPA board members and their contributions to the likes of Harry Reid's campaign, but they pale in comparison to AGA members' contributions to Harry Reid's campaign. And I'm not suggesting that things are that weighted, quid pro quo, dirty, but clearly that is politics. And there was it Slate Magazine that had the article recently where they said, sure, this online poker bill is about Harry Reid trying to give back to his casino supporters, but it's still good policy,
right?
And you can look at it for all the complaints the 2+2ers have. You can see that they're, it's not bad, just considering that before this situation, the only words we were getting from the government were using terms like illegal connected to American-facing sites and such. There's mechanisms for them to still be involved, and for all that. I think we're getting a pretty decent deal here, sort of. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, 2+2ers are going to complain about anything, no matter what the situation is. But this actually is it raises a good question. It came up in our chat log. And as if the federal legislation fails, what happens to the various state? And really, what if the federal legislation fails, what happens next? Aren't we really going to have something to complain about if this fails and maybe the government decides to crack down and there's no 15-month light at the end of the tunnel? What do you think?
We're definitely going to have something to complain about, because you already see that a couple of the states are going forward on their own. New Jersey, California, even D.C. now is put something out there. And it's going to completely fragment the industry. At least if we had an overarching piece of federal legislation, yeah, you can complain about all the various concessions and compromises that have to go into it. But at the end of the day, you're going to have one system that's going to, kind of cover the whole country, as opposed to having just an intrastate system in California and just an intrastate system in New Jersey or in Florida and D.C. or whatever. And some of those systems, by the way they're being drafted, are being drafted with at least as many questions as people have about Senator Reid's legislation.
Now, let's say it starts going state by state. At some point, doesn't the federal government kind of have to step up and say, okay, now we're seeing this happen at a mass or a larger scale on the state level, so maybe now we're almost forced to step in and try and figure out a way to do this?
You would hope so. Historically, in the past, that's kind of the way certain kinds of, for example, California cars, in terms of emissions. California federal government wasn't doing anything, so California went and did something on its own, and then that eventually became a federal sort of program. But how long did that take? Especially now when we're going to have a session of Congress where the control of the houses is split between the two different parties, probably going to be seeing a period of 2 years where it's going to be very difficult to get anything done. Never mind, get federal poker legislation put into place.
Both Dave and Dan, you've made the comment about a communication void, how the opposition got the opportunity to almost shape the debate and shape the argument. It's something that we wrote about on Wicked Chops last week as well. Ultimately, who's to blame for that? Where do you point the finger? Who should be the one responsible for putting out the talking points and getting in the mainstream media and shaping that debate? Is it the PPA? Is it Harry Reid and his staff? Is it the AGA? Is it a combination of everybody? Who is it? Is it you, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of everybody, and really, it's just sort of how it took place, kind of organically. How these things happen. We saw this before on a state level in Texas, where when the early versions of bills come out and people see certain parts they don't like and they're freaking out and all this, but there is a I don't know if I'm speaking here as a journalist or an advocate, because I can admit that I clearly want to see this bill pass. But you see these situations where the way these things get passed around, there's these on the fence senators that are being lobbied, basically. Hey, you got to get on board with the poker bill, and so they have their staff like, hey, all right, what are people saying about it? And then you get. They do some searches, and then they see stuff on Reid Bill, and they see all this stuff about online pros that are going to be out of work, and then they're going, oh well, this is no good because we don't want to be accused of costing jobs. So the message that would counteract that is all the jobs that the industry would create, the non-gambling jobs that this bill would create. But so that's where there's an element of maybe the people that were in charge of putting a message out, which I don't think Pokerati and Wicked Chops, should have that role of being in charge of putting a specific message out. It's maybe the people who whether it be the PPA, whether it be the AGA, whoever, maybe they didn't necessarily stay on top of it. And I just got to say, I do think that there was an underestimation of the power and influence of the poker media. We often downplay the role of the so-called poker media, but I think sometimes we forget that the poker media is a little more advanced than a lot of niche medias, because frankly, starting in 2005, we had so much more money in our realm, in our world, and whether it be video, whether it just be website development, whether it be SEO, these sorts of things. These are things that other niche medias haven't been able to have that kind of influence. But yet they start doing a search for Reid Poker Bill. Much to their surprise, there are websites like ours that are coming up as opposed to Politico sometimes. Right. And so I think we did have a lot more influence than people might have suspected.
Yeah. Part-Time Poker is in the chat log, and Part-Time Poker's doing a great job covering this, parttimepoker.com. They're basically out poker news on this one. But brings up the point, isn't it beyond the scope, the ability of the PPA to manage the message of this bill? Which is something I do agree with to a certain extent, but there still just seems to be an incredible lack of a coordinated effort on this bill to manage the message. And it reminds me of 2006 when, because nobody had their act together, Frist was able to slip this through, and there was no ability to just get out there and say, hey, this is bad, or this is why it should be what the Reid bill is today.
Well, but none of them, they don't all have the same interests as part of the problem. It's hard for them to put together a unified front when this is a bill that, for example, at least in its first iteration, so clearly favored the big casino interests like Harrah's and MGM.
Harrah's was right in the bill. I mean, they were practically. I mean, that's the way a lot of these bills are. Special interest type bills are written. So usually that main lobbyist or that main backer are in there helping write and shape the bill. And I think Harrah's
so
was
if anybody should have at least been shaping the message at the very beginning, it would, in my mind, it should fall to Harrah's and MGM to explain, why this is necessary and a good thing, as opposed to now they look kind of guilty because it looks like they were trying to slip a
very favorable right. Which leads.
But
go ahead, Dan.
F-Train, if you're a stockholder in MGM, I know Harrah's is not a public company as of this point, but if you're a stockholder in MGM, haven't the people running that company let you down if they are not doing whatever they can possible to squash what will become their biggest competition, i.e. a PokerStars, for example?
I'm not disputing that point, Dan. I'm just saying that they should have. If anybody should have been managing the message, it's them.
Right.
I see. Just kind of like get the online sites kind of going, yeah, this is overall a good thing for you.
Well, they just may have underestimated the fact that what you were saying earlier, that this was going to get as much attention as it did.
Right, and that brings up a point that I wanted to get into is, last week, it was either Monday or Tuesday last week, a lot of people I knew, I myself, felt like we were around 75-80% of this thing happening. And then all of a sudden the wheels came off, and I think part of the reason the wheels came off is because with the Harrah's and MGM shaping so much of the bill, but not the message, and trying to slip it through the way that they did and doing it covertly, it pissed off the Indian-based casinos, and they started screaming and hollering and trying to, because they were so unfavorably represented in that bill. Do you see that, Dan, as one of the reasons why the wheels came off last week?
Yeah, I think so, because I think we've seen that type of thing happen before with state legislation, right? Because California had a bill last year that was ready to go for their own statewide online poker, and then suddenly there's this fight with the different Indian tribes and the casinos and sort of who's getting in on the action. That's the thing, is so many people want this thing, but it just becomes sort of a fighting situation of how they want it. And, that's where I think we're going to see the extent of Harry Reid's skill, frankly, as a politician, to see if he really can pull all of these different interests. I mean, this is special interest politics. A lot of people like to badmouth special interest politics, but there's so many special interests here that have an interest, and we can couch it as freedom and protecting consumers and such, and that is exactly what the senators and representatives need to be able to do. But the real skill is having everybody going, okay, are we all on board? This is the one we're going to go with, because if you don't go with this, the option is nothing. It's sort of that classic prisoner's dilemma times 14. And, that's a tough and interesting situation.
Yeah. How much is Senator Kyle really an obstacle to that? If you removed Senator Kyle from the equation, do you think our chances of getting this passed increase exponentially during the lame duck session? Is he that big of an impediment?
I think he is, and one of the reasons why I think he is because he was one of the people that were responsible for the UIGEA in the first place. Everybody likes to paint Bill Frist as the villain in all of that, but Senator Kyle had a huge hand in it. Right. He just seems to have a bee in his bonnet about gambling.
Right. Yeah, Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, but I got to wonder if it wasn't him, would there be somebody else, that would be taking that role as beating this thing their pet project? And if you look at what these guys have said, though, it's they're not killing it necessarily. So you've got Kyle coming out there saying things like, yes, I've talked to Reed's office and we will guarantee you this is not going to be attached to the tax cut bill. Well, technically that may be correct, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's dead. There's not some other mechanism in play. And so Kyle seems to be the one leading that effort. But I got to think that frankly has to do with things well beyond poker, where this poker bill is really just a bargaining chip. The people that are opposed to it, they don't care about the details of the bill itself, about how long is the blackout period and who's going to be able to get in line first for the licenses. It's just sort of a yes or no thing for them. And it's not that big of a deal, I imagine, because they don't necessarily want to go on the front lines and go, yes, I am really opposed to bringing this money in as an offset for this $1.1 trillion spending bill or whatever it might be. So my guess is they're using it to be able to say, like, all right, Senator so-and-so, we will get behind you on this piece of pork or this add-on or this component of don't ask, don't tell, but we're not going to be on board with the poker bill. And then they're going to say, well, we really want you on board with the poker bill. Well, you're going to have to,
Right.
Be on board for don't ask, don't tell, or whatever this tax add-on is here. So, all right, we can do that. Done deal. I think that's the type of stuff that is going on just very hectically and crazily, like right now as we speak, actually.
Okay. If this does not pass and we go into 2011 still unregulated, do you guys see the feds really coming down and cracking down on the status quo? Is it way worse if it doesn't pass than if it does in the short term?
Yes.
How come? Why?
Well, I know for a fact that the DOJ in the Southern District of New York are looking at payment processor transactions right now. This week, last week, they're specifically looking at how those transactions have been coded in the past. Mm-hmm. They are going to go after the payment processors and the sites behind the payment processors if this doesn't pass through and the status quo remains.
Okay. Dan, you agree?
Yeah. With most of it, I think you will see maybe for the next six months poker world very similar to our current poker world, with people struggling to get money online but able to do it, and there still is an online poker world existing. But I think that might be, they will have the ability to shut things down now, because just to get this bill to where it was, the government had to have an understanding of the ability to stop things. I mean, that's what you look at PokerStars shutting off Washington State. You can almost see that, like, they're looking at it going like, well, all right, PPA, can these online sites, can they block out states that opt out? Because we need to give states the ability to opt out. Yeah, sure, we can show you. We're going to go turn off, we'll go tell PokerStars, see if they can turn off Washington State right now. All right, so it's done, but they know how to do it. They know how to turn off other states. And there's potentially, they have more and more information to stop things the way they've wanted to stop it all along, the way they've been trying to do it. So I think you will see that. I think it could be actually very devastating, frankly, for the industry, even if it doesn't appear to be that way for the next 6 months or so. And you're certainly, World Series qualifying is really going to be a mess, I would imagine. And I think it is potentially a dangerous situation, which is why I've got certain fingers crossed to go, all right, let's see how it all plays out here. People have to realize this, and so that is why there's going to be such a strong interest in making this go through, unless we get ourselves into a corner where we can't get out of it. But before then, I think you're seeing the federal government essentially slow play, while poker will go ahead and do their things and get themselves in a trap.
Right. Dan, I don't know if you've had a lot of time to review the new bill. Dave, I know that you haven't yet, the draft that hit today. But there was some new language regarding a stars and a full tilt and what they'll be able to do. And once this bill passes, how they won't be able to represent themselves with their brand names. And I see Scarlett in the chat, and she might be able to clarify this a little bit. But they will be able to theoretically merge, let's say, with an MGM and transfer their platform and users over to that. Dan, have you seen that? Have you heard anything about that gives it some clarity?
I took a quick scan, and I think we can see where the direction is going, but this is where I'm seeing this bill as kind of like the Forrest Gump, like box of chocolates. Like we don't necessarily know what we're going to get, but we can see sort of what the spirit, the intent is, and they want to be able to. I mean, this is where I think online poker does okay. They could have had this where it was just so hardcore. Let's shut these guys out completely. Make sure they can never make a dime on this again. And for whatever reason, they've decided not to do that. And but no, I haven't looked at the actual language, and this language could continue to change and until it's there. So I don't know that it does as much good to just kind of speculate on little line items and such. But if you look at the big picture, they're looking for a way to let in the current online sites, but with some penalty that is good with the, it looks like the AGA kind of would have the ultimate veto power on this to be able to go, yeah, that's not going to work for us, but they know that they don't get the bill necessarily if that's the case. So, anyway, so much more you can say on this, but the actual verbiage, that could change, although we've seen it evolve, and we can see them continue to make little concessions along the way. And the whole federal government seems to be in a spirit of compromise right now. And is our little sector going to be on that same train?
Yeah, I mean, from draft to draft, this is getting slowly better for sites like Stars and for Full Tilt. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go through really with a very fine eye to how this bill is specifically different, but even just by glancing at it, I can tell that it's getting a little bit better for sites like Stars and Tilt. So I think the irony of the whole thing is that if this thing goes through, it will more effectively shut down poker in the U.S. than the UIGEA ever did.
Right. Yeah.
The European Council just in the last couple of days made some conclusions where they were looking at online gambling regulations and how they are in Europe. And I think just the fact that they were looking at them says something about what they realized, how their competitive market could what kind of competition they could face if the U.S. were brought back into the picture. And they're basically now moving in a direction. This is a post that I'm working on for Pokerati. Actually, I was working on it leading up to this show. That they're looking sort of for a unified overall Europe kind of regulation. So their intra-state model, where France is regulated by France and Italy is all about Italian, they're recognizing a lot of problems with that, and that they need sort of a way to basically allow Europe to kind of play together, sort of. And so I think that says something interesting, too, that we need to be able to let states in, and states have their own say, but there is a need when it comes to the transfer of money and internet play over all these boundaries, whether it be nations or states, that there's got to be some sort of unified, overarching way to do it. And the fact that the Europeans are, actually made some declarations to move in that direction says a little something that they've done it. They know how much money is involved, and they're saying, all right, we need to do it a little bit better. And their better is a lot closer to the kind of stuff that is in this Reed bill ultimately.
Scarlett did chime in earlier to close in the loop on this one that they cannot use their logos for any skins of the game. And then the software vendors are subject to suitability requirements. So there's
bad for patch makers, I would suppose.
Yes,
yeah,
very bad
yeah.
for the local vendors that we know in Vegas and their business on the patches. Okay, let's wrap this up. We've got about 5 minutes or so. Winners and losers of this all. We always like to say, these people are clearly going to benefit. These people clearly aren't. Dan, on the Poker Beat, you guys had a pretty good debate on how this is going to impact the poker media. Dave, we were talking about it before we went live. Start with you, Dave. Poker media, does that fall clearly in the loser category?
It's a huge loser. It's a huge loser because if this were to go through and we get our blackout period, however long it is, 6 months, 10 months, 15 months, whatever it winds up being, so many of the poker media sites rely on affiliate revenue to stay in business. And in fact, some of them rely on other sources of money from the online poker sites besides just the affiliate revenue. And essentially what's going to happen is the U.S. is going to get turned off, and that money is going to stop. And those sites are going to have a huge problem figuring out how to make money. So they're going to be a really, really tough spot. A lot of people that Dan and all of us know are going to potentially be wondering if they're going to have jobs.
Right. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, when we were on the poker beat talking about the winners and losers, a lot of them did not emerge to me until after that show. And the big losers that I have since figured out are the small time online grinders. The people, not the people that are making millions playing online poker, but making $60,000, $80,000 a year, grinding it out. Like, they're really going to have this decision of, do I just go move for a while, so I can go play? And a lot of online pros are talking about doing that. But, I think they're going to face losses in the short terms. And, do they have their own bankroll to sort of weather it? Are they liquid enough to wait until they can come back and enter into a much bigger world, of online poker? So I think they potentially lose out. I think that I'm going to argue that the poker media actually is a winner in this, because I don't know that losing the affiliate revenue model necessarily hurts the quality of the poker media, because I think it forces, the model. There'll still be a need for coverage of certain things, but the model is definitely going to change. That if you've based your whole business on affiliate revenues, yeah, you're going to face some troubles. But we've all complained a lot about what that model has done to the level of coverage and the type of coverage and stuff. So, we may have a dark period sort of while things sort of, while the implosion continues and basically the current structures get knocked down. But will they, I think maybe they'll be able to build up and things with better quality, like, This Week in Poker will be able to rise. And the last winner is the Nevada Gaming Control Board, because clearly they are involved in all of this in terms of with their connections to the big casinos. And as this stuff is written, there's going to need to be a certain regulatory model and a proven regulatory entity. And clearly they are going to be the ones that are going to be able to essentially outsource their regulation skills and services and such. And, I think they definitely really want this, because they're ready to I don't know enough about how that body works, but essentially, offer out their services to other states.
Do you guys think short-term loser could be the WSOP? Are we looking at a potential scenario where we're going back to like 2004 entry-level numbers?
I mean, for sure, the number of entries is going to be down, because you're not going to have any online sites sending any U.S. players. You're only going to be having the online sites that exist in Europe and Australia and places like that sending players, and they're not going to be able to pick up the slack for what the U.S. is not seeing. Will it go down to 2004 level? I don't think it's going to go quite that down to 2004. I think what you do is you just take the number of Stars qualifiers that we had last year, and you take the number of Tilt qualifiers that we had last year, and chop that off and use that as a baseline for what we should be looking at as a realistic number for this year. And unfortunately, I can't remember what those numbers are.
I think they were pretty big. Dan, do you know?
No, they were actually lower than usual. That was what was surprising, was that the sites sent far fewer players than they had in previous years. I want to say Stars was about 1,000, maybe 1,100, and Tilt was about 600, and both those numbers were close to, they were at least 30% less than their previous years, and maybe as little as half. And so I remember Katkin did a piece, asking where these players came from, and it was a lot of online players buying in or satelliting live, but not necessarily making the PokerStars qualifier, but the kind of 23-year-old kid that has maybe a $80,000 bankroll and says, yeah, I'm going to go put $10,000 into the main event. That's where a lot of those players came from. So they will probably not have the ability to do the same thing, obviously, because of what we're talking about, how this will shut things down, sort of, and at least temporarily. And I hadn't thought about the impact on the WSOP, but I got to think that, good or bad, the WSOP is going to take a hit for this upcoming year. I'm going to think more about this and probably talk to some people about it, but I'm having a hard time seeing where they're going to get their players from, unless it's just these small time Darvin Moon type of qualifiers, at smaller casinos running $200 events, maybe $500 big events, Heartland Poker Tour, suddenly just, funneling in just, all sorts of World Series qualifiers. But I'm not so sure I see that happening, even though it kind of could.
Right. It's probably just a one-year blip for the WSOP, though, because...
I would agree.
Or 2 year, maybe?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends ultimately how long the blackout period is and when the first license gets issued, because for sure WSOP.com is going to be getting, if not the first license, in the first batch of licenses.
They probably already have a license.
Right. I mean, so I think it's just a one-year blip, and then in 2012, if the legislation were in place, then you would see the numbers rebound significantly.
Okay. Final thoughts. biggest winners, obviously, you brought up the Nevada Gaming Commission, Dan. In this latest draft, do you consider the Stars or Tilts sort of winners in this?
Yeah, I would agree that, like, all right, it's gotten better and better for them, and so they're doing something to convince them, like, hey, don't be looking to cut us out completely, and we can help you. And that really is the reality, is that, like, these sites, regardless of how you see what they've been doing in a legal perspective, they do have a lot to offer, because, you know, you can just look on Facebook and Zynga, and the scandals about, you know, free money being stolen on those things is, you know, makes Russ Hamilton just look, you know, infinitesimal. And, you know, do you really want these people suddenly being the ones in charge of, you know, offering secure online poker? You know, I mean, Full Tilt and Stars and a few other sites have learned a whole bunch about it, and they definitely have something to offer, let alone the tournament series and things like that. So overall, I would say the players, you know, stand to win out the most, though, if they can, you know, if they can shift gears and slow down for a bit, you know, and just realize that, you know, it's a long-term game, it's a lifelong game, and, you know, and that they all stand to benefit tremendously from it. I think that's, they do, you know, so
yeah,
that's
I mean,
my take.
When we look at winners and losers, you know, we were talking about poker media earlier. Poker media as it exists now is clearly a loser. Poker media as it might exist 15 months from now is a different thing. And I think the same point that Dan's making with, you know, players now, small-time grinders now, would probably fall into the loser category, because what are they going to do for 15 months? But small-time grinders, after the 15 months are over, probably fall into the winners category, just because it's so much easier to move money on and off, which should theoretically make the games a little better.
Okay. 1 year from now, last thought. Where are we? 1 year from today. What's going on?
1 year from today, we're sitting here going, oh my God, 3 months from now, the first licenses are coming out. It's going to be great. I really believe that.
Dan?
I think this is in.
Yeah, 1 year from now.
Yeah.
I think we are. You know, give me 3 seconds to think about this here. And yeah, I think 1 year from now, people are talking about how the new business model related to online poker will take shape. That is a guaranteed, regardless of what happens to this bill, because either we're dealing with the carnage of a crackdown, or we're dealing with the resurrection or redemption of an industry, you know, that is being built up on it.
Dan, 2 years from now, is that background a solarium in your new mansion?
You know, probably not, but it probably is a solarium in your new mansion, and maybe just a picture of Chops' solarium, you know, behind me. So
Right, with me with two big middle fingers up. Okay, that is it for the show. Dave, thank you for coming in.
Well,
Dan, thank you for joining via Skype.
pleasure to be here.
Can I say one more
Yes.
thing? Du Hamel.
Oh!
Welcome to French Canada. We have everything a heart could desire. Trapezes, trampolines, and lots of cheese. Would you like a mustache?
That's it for this year of This Week in Poker. Tune in next year when we kick the show off. We'll probably be doing a lot of podcasts actually in the interim. This Week in Poker available on iTunes. Our podcast available on Wicked Chops Poker and iTunes. Dave, plug your site.
ftrain.blogspot.com.
Dan, plug yours. Pokerati.com again.
As best blog on the Bluff Reader's Choice Awards, and the Poker Beat as best web-based show. Sorry to hijack This Week in Poker with that, but you know, just vote for the best, and actually, hopefully, Seamus will win.
Right. Thanks to all of our loyal viewers, everybody participating regularly in the chat log, from the Kev Mats to the BJs to the Alcan Hangs. All of you. Special thanks to Piper. I will see you soon. That's it. We'll see you next year.